Over the past 16 years, I've been building whole systems. The last 8 years, I've been building the cultural, how do I say this? The emergent cultural aspects versus like the male aspects of like economies and businesses, and then getting into the social architecture. In the last 3 years, I've been building agreement fields. And these are important because everything that we interoperate with is an agreement field. Every economy, every business, everything has an agreement field behind it. And our agreement fields that we operate under and how we consider what to be an agreement field has been hijacked. So the sense-making process that we're calling ACT, Agent Coherence Template, is a critical core piece of the organizational model called ASPO, Autonomous Zero-Point Organization. And that fits inside of an ecosystem. And right now we're using New Earth Operating System, although there's many ecosystems, many organizational structures, and many decision models. So the decision model is meant to harvest collective intelligence and work within whole systems. And if I had the graph, I would show you that the blueprint of an economy and an organizational structure actually always match. So in the current paradigm, we have pyramids, we have an owner and controller that makes the decisions for everyone else, and we have an economy where the money comes in to one person and gets distributed. So it's both in the pyramid fashion shape. And the new operating system we're trying to get to is more of a holonic looking different circles that could represent assets that are shared, because assets, that's what we do with assets, is we access them. So whether we own them or not, like this space here, we're accessing it. So we look at assets in an access manner with our economy, and we transition towards that. So let me speak first about the ASPO, and this is something that Oliver has, I've met Oliver online, I read his paper, and it was just like, so he has an organization called Helix, and it was like, this is what I've been building the last 16 years. So we talked, flew him over here, and now we're working together. And so he's sort of got the missing link to what I've been looking for in the fact that, you know, while I'm building agreement fields and saying, hey, join this agreement field, it's kind of vague. But if you're like, hey, this is an organizational structure that helps you enter into an ecosystem, it's much more clear. So we've got the decision model embedded in the ASPO, embedded in the ecosystem. And that's how we work together. So we're embedded together. Yeah, so the ASPO, the Autonomous Zero-Point Organization, was originally called Autonomous Zero Profit. And the profits are injected back into the ecosystem. So this is a very important piece of the model. So it's not an extractive model in any way, form, or fashion. Money can be donated, it can be lent, but the equity model is not possible to thrive in an ASPO environment. So you can't have equity, you can't have battery, maybe the battery. All right. So you can't have, this is beyond the ownership model. This is into whole living systems. So the new paradigm is purpose-driven, self-organized, and whole living systems. So if we're part of this economy, we're part of this world, we're a part of that paradigm. We are a part of that system. Whether it's whole living system, it's debatable. The what? The elements of it is purpose-driven. The new paradigm, the teal paradigm, consists, it's organizations as a living system. The three main pieces are purpose-driven, self-organized, so not decentralized or distributed, but it's both of those, but it's self-organized, which holacracy has built for us, and whole living systems, which we haven't seen emerge yet, which is what we're working on. How do we take this paradigm, how do we actually create a whole living system that uses the collective intelligence and rebuilds the collective commons? Because right now, all of our resources have been stolen from the collective commons domain and been privatized. Everything's owned in an ownership model, and that serves the people up top. That's helping. They want, the more sole proprietor structures that are happening, the more people have a pyramid structure, the more that system thrives. It's dependent on it. So let's start with the ASPO, and then we'll move into the decision model. But I really want to hone in with you guys today the decision model, because it's the core of everything. And then we'll get into a question and answer afterwards. But the ASPO, once again, do you want to speak like a little bit on the ASPO? Just kind of give a brief.
Sure. All right, so Oliver here. Let's start with a bit of history. The ASPO came through as a download about 1.5 years ago. Cool. And personally, I wanted to have the humility to say I don't think I'm the creator of it, but more the steward that has come through. And that notion of stewardship is one that is incredibly important in an ASPO and new paradigm ecosystem. Many times already today, I've heard people talking about ownership, how more people can own something, how we can own an NFT together or co-own a business. And although that's some improvement from our current economy, where only few people are owners to many people are owners, it's still relying on the same underlying principle, which is that we can possess something from our ego that is outside, possess with our ego something outside of us. And that fundamental assumption, I think, needs to be challenged if we're going to be moving into a new paradigm where we recognize the divinity within us, within all things, and start seeing ourselves as custodians and not controllers. And that's where the word stewardship comes in, is how we look after things together. Now, in the stewardship model, you end up often having very similar rights and access than in an ownership model. But the energy through which you interact with things is completely different because you're in one of looking after. It's like a child. You never own a child. You look after a child until they can stand on their own 2 feet, go to university and get laid, and then that child is its own being and is able to steward itself, hopefully. So the same is true about all things, including things like ideas. A lot of the problems and dysfunctions of the old system are related to trying to lock everything up because it's a me versus you mentality. So this is the second pillar of the ASPO after the stewardship, is that we're completely based in co-creation, completely based in how we can work together for the same objective, right? So right now we have companies trying to just help themselves in the individual unit. In the world that I imagine, I think many of us imagine too, we're all here trying to achieve the same thing, which is a world where we can all live in peace, prosperity, harmony, where we can all express our individual gifts and genius and be celebrated for that and celebrate ourselves for that in a whole living society. So the way in which the ASPO achieves that is with this notion of zero profit, where you have to re-inject all excess capital back into the creation of more value, whether that's directly to your community, whether that's lowering the price and making your sustainable good more accessible to more people. You can choose a variety of methods, but within that model, each ASPO relates to one another like a family member and not like a business transaction. And so if I have a good or service, say I'm providing marketing to the outside world, but I'm an ASPO, and another ASPO needs marketing, then I have to, in fact, give them my marketing services at the price it costs me to do them, not at the profit rates, but at the minimum price. So if you think of this at scale, what starts to happen is that every single ASPO gets really specialized in a craft that is its genius, its blueprint, and that goes into what's called the master plan of that ASPO. And so you get a degree of economies of scale, which emerges because everyone is specialized, but each ASPO, although sovereign and their own mission, interacts with one another like two departments would in one organization. So you need marketing done, you're like going to a specialized marketing department that's really good at that, getting the cheapest price possible, because we're not trying to profit of each other, we're trying to co-create the new world. And that is really what ties the whole thing together, is that any single ASPO is on the same mission to help co-birth a new, healthy, thriving, and prosperous society. So I could say more, but I think Josh wants the mic back.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll have a question and answer so we can go over the ASPO and the ACT process. So embedded in this is the ACT process, the Agent Coherence Template. And then we'll do a question and answer. I'll just run through these two, and then we'll get to questions and answer, because I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions on this. So the Agent Coherence Template starts with a master plan, like he said. So we have a master plan, and everyone that is a leader in the field now steps down, and that master plan or that agreement field becomes the captain. Okay? So before you join a master plan, it's consensus. So once that's all written out and it shows you exactly how people are going to work together to the T, you either get to decide, do I join this or do I not? So that's consensus. That's the natural model of us sense-making as to whether we're going to join someone. The problem being in today's world is that things aren't clear. It's, hey, I'm working for this boss, I'm going to give you a job, I'm going to give you a paycheck, and whatever I decide at that moment is what you're going to have to do, and whatever mood I'm in, you might have to even, swallow your pride and just follow me, and your purpose, the purpose-driven part of it gets thrown out the window completely in the old paradigm. So that's gone. The distribution's gone, and then the whole living systems can't operate when they're off balance. It's like having a giant head and no arms. So the distribution of flows of energy are very important in a whole living system, in an operating system. So that's communication, that's our roles, how we're flowing through roles. Are we sticking in our roles? Are we keeping everyone from our role? This is not going to bring us into the new paradigm. This isn't going to allow our energy to flow, and it's going to be more of the programming that we've already had, growing up. So in our sense-making is here to support that. It's here to harvest collective intelligence, and it's here to serve the whole system. So the idea behind it is you can't force anyone, to make a decision, to do anything you want them to do. Okay, so how do you do that? You gain alignment and agreement. So alignment comes first. So we align through our vision, values, principles. So we start with our vision. We align on a vision. Great. Now, what are the principles behind that? Okay, well, let's be loving, let's be kind. These are very vague. These do not help us move forward, and they cannot be called agreements. So you extract your values from your principles. So if it says be loving, love might be your value. And then you also extract your agreements from your principles, or you create them from there. Now, your agreements are the really clear boundary of what you're creating. You either are in it or you're not. You're either vegan or not. You either eat MGO foods or you don't, versus, hey, I eat healthy, okay? So those kind of agreements aren't going to be global in scale. Those are going to be for a space where you're interacting with someone. And so when you get to space agreements is where you get to those kind of agreements that affect our physical body, and we want that around us, or we're interacting with someone, like a consent culture. But this isn't what the decision model is about. So the decision model, we create a master plan. We align with that master plan, and we are part of it. So now that saves us 99% of all the decisions that we have to make. So instead of fighting every day over every single little decision and everyone sitting in a room and hassling it out, you've already got it set. The builders can go work for the next 3 years and get their job done. So there's literally zero, the friction in this, the 0 point is also representative of zero friction. It's a flowing whole living system, okay? So you have a master plan, you have sub-master plans. So your department might be, you're a builder. You get to go build your buildings for the next 3 years. Between your team, you're still going to have some decision-making that happens daily. This we push to the edges. We can use the ACT process itself to design whatever you want. Maybe you all raise your hand and you all said yes and you move on. That's usually the quickest. Okay, so now what happens when we want to update the master plan? We want to update the master plan. That's a big decision. If we're all on a boat and we all, are going to Hawaii, and then someone says, hey, why don't we stop off over here on the way? That's a big decision that everyone's involved in. We've all already got on that boat. We've all decided to go to Hawaii. So naturally, that would take all of us agreeing, okay? Now, there's a difference between a solution and a preference. If it's a preference, hey, I want to go over there because they have some, great scenery. It would take consensus of everyone to agree, because now if they're out of gas and they need to stop in one of 3 islands and there's only 3 on the way, then you have to have a solution. So the original plan does have to change, okay? So this is no longer consensus, but consent, okay? So how we would go through these decisions. So the first thing we do is go through advice process. So we say, okay, we have these 3 islands to go to. And we all talk about it. One person might propose. We have a proposal process, which I can't show you because we don't have our slides. But you have a proposal process, and you propose, I go to this island because X, Y, Z. You make it very clear. We have templates for you. And you put it out there. Now, you get a chance for everyone to give you advice. So they go through an advice round, and they say, well, what about this? What about that? And what I've found in the last 4 years is that through this process, it's literally the natural way that we make sense as humans, but it's starting with the clarity of the master plan and the clarity of the proposal, okay? But the way that we make sense as humans is through this advice process. That's 99% of how we do it. So we have never had to go past this in the last 4 years of operating and road testing this. But what does come next is other sense-making. So let's say that you have 2 proposals. Someone says, no, I really got to do this. I advise to Oliver to put in cinnamon to his cake recipe. And he says, no, I don't want to put cinnamon in. And he says, I'm doing the cake without it. Then I would say, okay, well, I really think it has to have cinnamon. I want to propose one with cinnamon. And I propose it, and then it goes through coaching. We go through some other decision iteration methodology, which is sense-making. So we take it through and we talk about how we can make one cake, because we want to have one, water park we all can access. We don't want to have a swimming pool in everyone's backyard. That's not what we're here for. We're here to create something amazing together that we can access. And so the only way to do this is to try our best to create one thing. And so it goes through decision iteration, and then if it just can't be the same, then we look, can we do both? This is where voting falls short, because it's one or the other. There's no sense making. People, they don't even talk to each other. In whole systems thinking, you always want to talk about a decision with people. You want to interact. What people end up doing in today's society is they go in their own homes, they make a decision, they write it down, they pass it in. So that's not using the collective intelligence. So what we do is we have a chance for advice, we have a chance to do both, and if you can do both, great. There's the rare case you can't do both, and in this case, we use a value wheel that was invented by Futurist Playground. And in the value wheel, basically the values that are going to bring you to where you want to go, that are based off your principles, which all match up in our future system that hasn't quite been built, but for now it's analog and it works fine. But in the future, all these things match. And so for now, but you still can take your values, put each decision, does this decision A match my value of autonomy, of safety, of love, of freedom? Does it match my communities? And does it match my society? And maybe the world, depending on how far you want to take it. Now, we can literally map out decisions based on what fits our values better, and we can see one decision is way down, it's below the threshold, we don't even want to think about it. Then there's 2 up here, and which one's higher? We can literally use collective intelligence to map out these decisions. And then we can, decide to go with that one if we can't do 2. So that's it. The last thing I want to say about the the ASPO is, yes, there's a process that we're fine tuning in, and we're at this brink of innovation where we're literally, and this is a request to everyone here, we're literally at the point where as we build this house together, we're coming in, we're building a project together, what do those key holders look like? And Riki's helped me with this. His Seeds has built a little bit of this back end multi-key holder technology so that we can, but we really want to have it so smooth and so easy that literally anyone coming in can say, hey, I pronounce this, this is my original creation, I'm giving it to the collective. Doesn't mean I can't bring what I brought with me when I leave, but I'm bringing it now, and we all get to create, instead of intellectual property, it's an intellectual creation. An original work now turns into a creative work, or what's it called? Emergent work. Okay, emergent work. So now we have emergent works, which is how nature works. If I'm in a collective and I say, hey everyone, I think we should put yellow trash cans in the corner, and then everyone says, that's a great idea, you can have a trash can, that'll solve the problem. Oh wait, but I thought of the idea, it's mine, don't do it. I'm gonna go on vacation, I'll be back in a couple months, don't do anything. I've sort of like blocked the progress. So how intellectual property actually works is if you want to own something, you keep it to yourself. That's how the law works, that's how they advise you, any lawyer will advise you, keep it to yourself. If you want to bring it to the table, you bring it to the table. It's pretty much that simple. Okay, that's the first round. Does anyone have questions? It's okay. I don't think there's...
Hi, thank you so much for this talk, for the mapping and everything. I mean, I've been working with my founders and we've created what we considered a conscious company. But financially, we're an S Corp. We're like B certified, B Corp certified. How would you suggest that we transition from our S Corp into this particular model? Because it's ideally where we originally wanted to be originally. Yet, like, there are certain people within our organization who have invested more resources or more time, and how does that all get reconfigured?
Yeah, so we have a level 1 ASPO, which means you're not part of a whole system. You're out there, you're an ASPO, you're aligned with the principles, you've created an agreement field that is considered an ASPO. But you're not ready yet. You have intellectual property, you have stakeholders, you have investors, you have the wrong structuring, you have the wrong decision models. So what we would do is we would form an ASPO under the agreement of whoever's the decider currently, and we have economic models that support this. So literally, this can be implemented with or without, this can be implemented through the current system or through the agreement of the individuals, of all involved. So in multiple ways, but you would create an ASPO fund that the profits, maybe all the profits, maybe you're dedicated to becoming a level 2 ASPO, and so all the profits maybe you dedicate to this fund, and that fund literally works with the ecosystems that are built that know how to be a level 2 ASPO and know how to transition IP and know how to do all this stuff, and they literally come in and exchange. You pay the ecosystem to help you transform if you're not ready. And then so you slowly transform. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add, in terms of the level 2 ASPOs, we actually have a case study that we're working with right now. It's a company that's had about $1 million US put into it so far from a few investors and one main investor and then different people on sweat equity. And they're in the process of becoming a level 2 ASPO. And so we've had to go through the process of how do people actually let go of the notions of control and ownership and enter into a new model where everyone's stewarding and they remember the reason why they started the company in the first place was to have a certain impact, and then they got lost somewhere along the way with how that looked in the current system. So the way we're doing it currently for level 2 ASPOs is there's a pre-agreement at this stage that all shareholders will sell back their shares to the treasury of the company. and meaning that no one will own it anymore, and all of the shares will be legally owned by the company itself. And the value at which those shares will be sold back is determined based on the current value of the company, not the future value once it becomes part of an ASPO. And in that process, all of the people involved can still be involved in the ASPO and still want to work there and still want to be part of the company. They're just not owning it anymore. They're now part of the stewards who have roles and can be employees of the company and still get paid properly, but essentially they've let go of the need to control it from an ownership perspective. And so what really changes is they give up the idea that they'll get big dividends one day, but they still get paid back for what they put in money and in time. Once the ASPO reaches a certain key performance indicator, such as cash flow positive plus growth, then it can pay back the people based on the agreement that was made at the time of beginning the transition.
If they don't want to sell their shares?
Well, then they don't want to become a level 2 ASPO. They can be a level 1 ASPO and work in some ways with the ecosystem, but they won't. When you're a level 2 ASPO, one of the key defining things is that you're now supported by the whole system. You hold a key role. If you're not doing so well and you're holding a key role in the ecosystem, then you'll have all the finances you need to keep doing that because it's operating as one living body. When you're level 1 ASPO, you're still under the assumption of the illusion of separation of your organization and the system. So it's joining a collective at the expense of your own need for protection from feeling separate.
For those who are not that emotionally or spiritually developed yet to have this type of need and awareness, what kind of arguments or benefits can you use to convince your key stakeholders to be part of this new paradigm?
A lot of the people out there today that we're speaking to are wanting something to give to their kids, for example. So what world are you leaving to your kids? Are you leaving them, with some money where they can be dominated by others and they're living in this chaotic world, or are you literally leaving them a legacy of a world which they get to actually have true wealth, happiness, purpose, joy, passion, everything, and abundance? So that's one of them. I mean, maybe their kids' purpose is another thing. Maybe their kid's on coke and he's, suicidal, and you're saying, hey, do what I'm doing. You're going to make money. And he's like, I don't want to do that. So, instilling purpose and passion back into everything we do and true wealth. Thanks.
I found the description of from going from level 1 to level 2 really helpful, because I still feel like I'm relating to an ASPO how I may to another organisation that I would recognise in the current system, and I realise that that isn't how I should relate to it at all. But can you help me move my mental model of it from the current system to the bigger one that you're talking about? Like, are there any threads that we recognise now that are still relevant in that?
The main thing is the degree of separation, right? In the current paradigm, it's me versus the world, and you're born somewhere, and oftentimes you're already indebted to the system in some type of way, and you have to earn your way to be able to at least take care of your own needs. So it's a very me-centric paradigm. In the new paradigm, it's much more of a collective-centric, where we all support one another, and it is our birthrights to benefits from the natural abundance that the planet is able to provide for everyone. And we have the technology around the world to be able to support abundance living for everyone now. There's no doubt about that. So in the transition process from the level 1 to level 2, the main shift that has to happen is the understanding that I am no longer doing something alone, but I'm doing something on behalf of the collective, even if I can maintain the source stewardship of the idea. So what does that mean, source stewardship? We're not trying to say, well, it was your idea and then it just belongs to everyone. No, you still have the some form of authority for being the channel and the mission through which that idea has come through, right? And that gives you special rights sometimes to prevent passing certain decisions which could sabotage what you started it for in the first place. But in that transition, you're stepping down from being the one who's in power and controlling it to protect yourself into the one that's stewarding it, looking after it, so that it can actualize its fullest potential and serve the collective and everyone involved to its greatest capacity. So it's really a shift from how do I protect myself, my family, with my income and everything, into how do I serve at the best capacity of the society. And we all know this, right? Energetically, if we're in a motion of service and giving, then we will be able to receive for everything that we give out. And so even though we have mechanisms to allow this within the ASPO, natural law will dictate that that will happen anyway, where you will receive back and be fully supported by the whole system as well.
So just to lead on for that, how does it tie then to the pre-existing like legal or financial structures that we currently?
So we researched for about 9 months how to modify current business frameworks to enable an ASPO to operate. And the biggest challenge is to remove ownership and to put it into stewardship. So it depends on the jurisdiction to answer that question. But the typical use case scenario is that all of the equity shares of an organization become wholly owned by the treasury, the organization itself in legal terms, with a mountain of barricades where certain members are contractually bound to object to any motion to change that, and where essentially you create a container within the current legal form which allows the ASPO to operate fully as an ASPO, which allows decisions to be fully distributed and non-hierarchical. And because there's no equity shares, you create what's called governance shares, which are issued to every member of the ASPO, and which give you the legal rights in the legal system to make decisions for that company without having to have a CEO or director. You have a governance share, and then you still use the act process, but legally speaking, everyone has the rights to make decisions for that organization. There's much more, but that's the essence.
Yeah, and there's many ways to do that. So in a legal corporation, which is bound to the codes of the current system, that's a great option. There's lawful options, which we get to literally design it however the hell we want. We're still challenged with how to distribute the authority, which really basically comes down to the carte blanche ownership model and distributing that to teams. So Holacracy has done that for us. So we're able to do that if we do it right, if we embed that into our model. And the economic model, we actually have what's called a level 2 access. So we're literally, as these funds come in, they're going towards assets that are stewarded and projects that are stewarded, starting with global level, because these are the biggest hijacked and these are the things that we share the most. And re-establishing those community spaces, re-establishing what it is that we all live and breathe off of, that we're living off of. So we're off the dirty nipple onto our own playground. And so when it comes to the economic model, we're literally transforming money. There's barter systems that help that happen at scale, but literally we can do it right here, right now, using a ledger, which is what a currency is. Any community currency we can build, but there are frameworks of how to build those. Before money existed, we used a contribution economy. We all helped each other build our house. If there was 5 bananas, we shared them. And this was our agreement field. And this was family. And so now that's been hijacked. So we're reestablishing the collective commons. That's part of the model.
Yeah, so just to add to that, we humor the legal system while we still have to, but the legal system will not last forever, and we don't have to do anything to help it collapse. It's on that way anyway. And so what Josh is talking about with the L2A, level 2 access, is already today, with current laws, an organization type which doesn't require a legal shell around it to operate, so long as it doesn't touch fiat. If it is an organization that can be fully based on contribution, gift economy laws, help your neighbor laws, I help you build your garden, I can have some vegetables, you can create a distributed organization that is fully lawful, instead of legal is the word you use, to enable the ASPO to function. But while you have to deal with fiat currently, you need some form of entity, and that's when you go down the other route of adapting current organization structures. More questions?
Just specific to what you just said, do you have any experience with people that have gone to a gift economy or help your neighbor law? Do you have an experience of those that have already transitioned to the gift economy or help your neighbor law aspect with this?
Yeah. We've built our own contribution economy. However, the interface that currently exists that's the best is there's a national one called Simbi.com, and it's for time banking. Time banking laws are the help your neighbor laws. And you can go on there and find all kinds of people to exchange with this token. What they've just made new on all these currencies, we're working with about 5 currencies, and we have a consortium field so that we can literally take these currencies into basically what Lion was saying earlier, a distributed holochain network that's globally governed by each person. Has the agreement fields literally allow each community, because a solo actor in an economy can be dangerous. So each community to regulate and have what they need to be able to fulfill that role. Simbi has now moved from just time banking to goods and services. We have another friend who literally you can put crypto into the platform and play all day long in this whole new field of business, and then you can pull your money out later. So we've come to a new time, and this is why we're creating a consortium, because if one of these does go down for any reason, these are all ledgers. These ledgers can be passed on to the community, to something decentralized, to, so that people don't ever lose their momentum or lose what they put in or whatever. The transition from one of these things where we're putting crypto in or money in to one that is purely based on agreement fields and contribution, that's a whole nother matter to speak about. But the basic premise is this: if I have a village and we all are using contribution, we built our houses, we built our garden, we share everything, and then we have an investor come in and he builds some more houses and we rent them, but he's given us a loan, he's given us $1 million, we owe him 35% of our profits forever. We're now in eternal debt to somebody. We now have lost our economy. We've completely, and this is how the stock market works. If you see the triangle, the work's being done at the bottom. But besides minimum wage or whatever it takes to pay people to do what they need to do, all those profits are going to people that didn't do anything. So the systems needs to be flipped. It's completely backwards. It's drifting up, and it actually needs to drift down. This is why in our economy, we have a 2.5% charge instead of a bank fee or a credit card fee that goes to your ASPO, to your community. You have to have a community to have an ASPO. We have to learn how to collectively spend funds together. This is the training that comes along with it.
The question of laws and legality is a very controversial one, because there are all sorts of things you can do to get around the laws and achieve what you want, from using trust structures, from using in the US what's called 508, religious institutional structures, which allow you to have a utility token without it being considered security. And these are what some of the people we're working with have been using as ways to get around. And so the key, though, I think, is to try and understand what do we want to achieve first before how we're going to achieve it legally. And then there's always a means and a way to get there if we can get clear on what we're trying to make happen. And so that's a lot of the work that we focus on in Helix, is to actually figure out how we get there and create the blueprints, the structures, the frameworks to enable organizations to have a plug-and-play package where they don't have to figure out how to work with a 508 or a trust or restructure an ASPO, but they can just say, yeah, I want to do this, I believe in the vision, what do I need to do? And then they go through the agreement fields, they go through the education, and they can make their own ASPO. So that's part of our objective, is to simplify that whole process to allow sovereignty to be more accessible to more people, to operate lawfully outside of the current system, or by gaming the current system to achieve what we all want to achieve.
How does financing work in an ASPO? If someone wants to contribute financially but not through sweat, how does one get rewarded if he's not a donor?
It depends. There's a few ways. So in the case where it's people who are working there, the ASPO is allowed to make profit, is just not allowed to extract it to shareholders. And so you, in an ASPO, you still have to pay everyone what's called an integral wage, right? So we have something called the root truth templates, which means to ensure the health and thriving of all life, RTT, root truth template. And that is a standard throughout the whole ecosystem of like, if you're paying someone not enough that they can't even survive, then you're not fulfilling your duty and you're not being responsible as an ASPO. So for employees, you're still being fully compensated for what you're putting in. Now, eventually that will transition out of fiat and into barter systems, into contribution systems, into access-based system, which is the ultimate resource-based system. We won't get into it today. But that's one way for employees. Now for investment capital, for example, what we've done so far has been mostly philanthropic because we're still having to bridge from the old world into the new world, and we've worked with philanthropists who do see the vision and don't care about ownership, but want to see a change. That's been how we've raised money, but there are other means you can, I don't believe in it so much, but you can get a loan in an ASPO from an institution and pay it back. I prefer to be out of that system altogether. And the other thing you can do, which I think we discussed briefly, is the fund, where someone can contribute a good or service or an ability to the ASPO without compensation at the time of contribution because there's not energy to give it back, but with a smart contract agreement that at a certain point in the future, they will get paid back should that ASPO be successful and reach cash flow positive, for example. And what the fund allows is a very unique model where everyone who's helping out, their highest intention is that the project succeeds because then that's how they get their energy balanced versus the VC world where the highest intention is to make money, not for the project to succeed. And so you end up, if you think of it metaphysically, with all of the intentions of everyone being placed on the success of a certain project because everyone's invested in it. So yeah, that's some of the ways. I mean, capital is certainly a bridging thing because the fiat is from the old system, so you have to get a bit creative with some of the ways too.
I'm really curious about how many companies you have already in ASPO, how many are level 1, how many are level 2, what's the diversity of resources that's offered if, you know, like we were to decide to join. Okay.
Just starting, I'd say, oh wait, that's also for the recording. Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, we're just starting, so we've probably got about 5 to 10 onboarding, but we've been running these types of organizations for multiple years, and to become an ASPO and later join an ecosystem is completely available. To create our own ecosystem is available, but I think it's stepping out of the world of someone, I'm working for someone. So even when you said employees, it's a level 1 mind frame of, you know, we might be stuck in a company where that's the only choice we have. However, in the true ASPO model, we're not employees. It's like a family. We're doing it together. We don't pay each other. We're in it. Yeah.
I was just saying maybe like contributors would be another word for employees.
Contributors, yeah. So contribution, and at least in my definition, is you're contributing to the whole. You're contributing to something bigger versus like donating. I'm giving to you. You're contributing your time, or working for someone, which is totally different too.
Yeah, just to further answer that, we're in a situation now where there's much more demand than supply availability for ASPOs. So we have a growing list of projects wanting to become them, but it's too time consuming for us to work one-on-one with them. So all of our efforts are being put into creating documentation, education series, pre-made templates, agreement fields, to be able to streamline that process. So our timeline is roughly between now and February to have finished creating a full package that can allow ASPOs to scale quickly. So not so many right now because we are still building out the core foundational pieces.
Yeah, so we're able to handle probably about 5 that are actually up and going at the current moment, because we can literally feed drop the agreements into we're using Notion right now, we can feed drop, it takes so much time for people to align. I mean, people aren't ready energetically to get there. So this is all about discernment, alignment, who are we working with, what is our team, what's our vision. There's so much work for those wanting to be an ASPO to do, that literally the ones that we've been working with, we're waiting for them to catch up, you know. So it depends on how dedicated you are.
And that work is going to gradually reduce as coherent education and documents and case studies emerge. It's especially high now because it's the beginning.
Sorry, I had 3 questions. I was curious to understand your thought process in terms of how you would determine the integral wage, like the minimum cost per person, and then also how would you track the contributions within the organization, and then if those contributions aren't met, how would you offboard those people?
Okay, we'll try our best. 3 big questions. The wage thing is always a little bit tricky because when founders are starting an organization and there's no money, no one's getting paid, right? If you're a level 1 company. And so everyone's just putting in sweats and to make it happen. Now, the standard is the health and thriving of life. So if it's going to be completely different depending on where you live, what's a reasonable amount for you to be healthy and thriving. If you live in New York City or in Bali, you need way less money to live in Bali than in New York City, right? And so, although the ASPO is the one that's defining how to pay people, don't forget there's no one person like in a hierarchy that is making that call, which is leading to abuses that you may be pointing to. Because everyone here is working together in service of creating a benefit, then they're defining what truly will enable them to live a fruitful life without being in excess, but without being in lack. And in time, there will obviously be guidelines and some form of process where things can get flagged if there's an abuse in either direction, paying too much or paying not enough. We imagine that there will be certain ASPOs who are dedicated to helping maintain the whole thing, where they kind of just help us to come and sort things out if there's a problem. So that's in terms of the wages. Contribution, we have a whole sub-project that's going to go live very soon, or we'll release the first paper. That's called the Value Mapping Project, or ValMap, where we did a big peer review of all of the intangible things that need to be measured within a whole system in order to properly allocate and distribute value remuneration in all sorts of forms, whether it's in fiat, in money, or whatever. And we measured, I think there's like 20 different indicators needed. We haven't implemented it technologically, but we're at the stage of having done the study of what we imagine would be needed to properly assess that. But that is obviously something which still needs experimentation. And then offboarding, in the end of the day, so when you're joining the ASPO, there's ASPO onboarding agreements, which we actually just finalized last week. And part of those is an agreement that you're a sovereign being, and if you want, you can do other things and have other roles in other ASPOs, unless that specific ASPO is demanded of you in an agreement that you have more. But if you're no longer able to fulfill the agreed upon role in your ASPO, as should be normal, then you meet the criteria to have that role be given to someone else to maintain the integrity and the health of the whole system. So it's not an insult to you, it's a benefit to the system that we need to keep the important roles running.
Yeah, I want to speak on that. So the reciprocation specifically is if you don't contribute, you don't get reciprocated. But if you are still in the agreement field, you're still in the agreement field. So just separating like you're hired and fired from, hey, I'm getting return for my contribution, or I'm not contributing and I'm not getting return. So you might be a coach and work one day a week coaching, and maybe that's not enough because you've mapped out your ecosystem. Maybe in the future it's plenty because we've got a great economy and we can actually like just live life and we can do other workshops and what's our passion. And in the beginning, we might have to do something that, you know, maybe we have to maintain the gardens or whatever needs to be done in order to get that reciprocation if we're on that model. So those are literally passed out to the edges. So people get to decide in their own little economies and their own ASPOs how to deal with that. There's a basic needs measurement criteria that gets paid before anything else, so that, you know, people that are contributing at least, you know, from the profits, mind you. So this isn't a replacement for a good business plan. You know, it's a great model for us to create something together. But if you don't have a good business plan, then it's not going to work. It's not going to make a profit, and it's, you know, and if you have no profit, then you don't have any resources in your pocket.
I know we need to wrap up. Just to clarify, yeah, so business plan, we need to also reconceptualize, I think, in time, is more like how do we have a good value exchange so that, and that's what a good business is when there's a good value exchange that can be sustainable. And so even though at first you're interacting with fiat, the same is true once you're in a completely non-fiat, access resource-based economy, you still need to be providing value to the society. And there's the measurements and the value mapping project I mentioned briefly is going to help to be able to assess whether that ASPO is really delivering something that's of service to society or not, to determine whether it's holding an important role or whether that energy should be used elsewhere. Fundamentally, we need to figure out how to best distribute resources on a planetary scale so that everyone can live in abundance. And the ASPO approach is one where that can occur in a distributed manner without one person making the calls, but with everyone collectively taking care of their little parcel of reality that they've been assigned and that they've been called to do, and collectively connecting between themselves to do a good job altogether.